All right, so let's get started. Last time, because we've been more people, I also asked them to introduce themselves, but it's not necessary for us anymore, and also not necessary for me. But in order to jump into the topic of the workshop that I wanted to present today, I asked the participants if they can think of the Canadian flag. And most of the people might have thought of the Canadian flag like that. Maybe they have thought of a flag that is blowing in the wind, maybe of a different material, but most of them thought of this. Whereas next, I asked them to think of a bottle. And when we think of bottles, there's such a variety of different bottles that we can think of, different materials, different sizes, different colors. So a bottle is not as easy to describe as the Canadian flag. And then we moved on to thinking about languages, mental health, and migration. We've already seen that it's getting more difficult because we do not have a picture in order to describe that. And because depending on the language and the context that we've grown up, language, mental health, and migration is understood differently. So in order to know what we talk about, we need to communicate about what is language, what is mental health, and what is migration itself. Otherwise, it might be difficult that we are on the same page. So yesterday, I touched on the question, what is the relationship between first and second language in mental health, and also how we can improve it deliberately in second language courses. I started out and I asked the participants to describe and write on the page what language is, what mental health is for them, and how they communicate about mental health. In addition, I also invited them to describe what they use language for, what they use mental health for, and also how it is developed. Maybe you have an idea. What would you say? How do I pronounce your name again?
Abdelhamid.
Abdelhamid. Abdelhamid. What do you think? How is language developed and how is mental health developed, and what is it used for from your point of view?
You mean how it's developed and started?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I'm just what do you mean by the question? Yes.
When you are a little child, how do you learn a language? How do you acquire a language?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Definitely, language, it's mainly depend on listening. So, for example, you listen, then you repeat. So this is how you develop usually the speaking abilities. For this reason, for example, if someone born as a deaf, he cannot speak. So it is just repeating words. You listen to words, then you repeat it, and then in the brain you will attach this word. For example, you see flower. So you see this is shape is flower. So it will be linked in the brain that when you see this thing, it is flower. So usually you see something, you will hear the word about it, what it means, then the brain will connect the two together. Then you start developing your own language. So for example, if someone, his parents speak Arabic as a native language, but they moved to Canada, and since his child, he start to listen to words in English, he will speak in English. So it's not genetic thing, but it can be modified by the environment around you. So whatever you hear, you will repeat and you will speak. So this is usually how you develop the language.
Mm-hmm. What would you say when it comes to mental health? How is this acquired and developed?
I don't know, it's a completely different thing because the language is part of the senses which any human have, but mental health, I think it will depend on the culture, how they raise you, for example, how they, since childhood or even before childhood as infant or newborn or in the early childhood, how the parents take care of you, how they deal with you, and how they deal with your actions. The reaction from them actually can affect your mental health. For example, if you as an infant cry For example, how the mother will deal with you. She will hold you and try to soothe you and stop you from crying, or just ignoring you and leave you to cry. So this also will start to develop some things in your brain, which later will affect your mental health. Because most of the studies showed actually within the first few years of age, your brain will develop. And depend on any reaction happen to you at this age, it will affect your mental health in the future. So I think this is one of the things it developed from early childhood. Your mental health will be affected by everything surrounded to you and by the interaction between you and the people around you, like the parents, sibling, and all this. So if you have been neglected by everyone, definitely your mental health will be impaired. But if there is caring and this, definitely your mental health will be different. So it depends on the reaction from you, which depend on the reaction from the people surrounding you at this developing age.
Yeah, that's really true. So the environment, the social context that you grow up has a huge impact on your language and also on your mental health. And in particular, the first few years are highly important for developing language skills, but also mental health skills. Let me quickly fill you in on some of the ideas that we shared yesterday when it came to language. Because you're a translator, you might be very familiar also with the different aspects that language incorporates. So on the one hand, there are several definitions, and I brought one definition that I think is very useful when we talk about mental health. And this is the definition by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it says that definition are the words, the pronunciation, and the methods of combining them used and be understood by a community. On the one hand, people, in particular when it comes to the health promotion field, they often talk about language and they think about certain words that are necessary to be known, such as emotions or mental illnesses, how they are defined, the names for it, or maybe also positive activities. But also it's highly important that we know how to pronounce it. I'm not sure about the Arabic language, but in some other languages, the meaning changes depending on the pronunciation that you have. And therefore, it's highly necessary to know the language that you have been brought up into, and also the language that you need to learn in the future and that you communicate with. And it is important to have a bit of an understanding that language consists of phonemes and graphemes, so the sounds and also how we write it. If the writing system is the same in Arabic or in English, you know that it's different. So we need to learn it, and also what we hear in Arabic language might be described a little bit different in English language. So people need to get familiar with that. Apart from the vocabulary, also the grammar and sentence structures are highly important, because when it comes to mental health, for instance, it is necessary that you know also in second language how we can combine cause and consequences, for example, with conjunctions. We need to know how do we talk about situations that have occurred in the past, in the present, and in the future. All this is necessary to communicate our own feelings to others, and also made us understand, and so that we are understood by the psychologist, and also the doctor can decide what is the best treatment for us. Furthermore, it is highly important that we have a better understanding of language, that there are linguistic registers. So when we talk about linguistic registers, we talk about different situations that we use language in the family or at the workplace, or also at the doctor's place. And all these different places require different vocabulary, require different grammar structure, and also require different ways of interacting with one another. Sometimes we think if we simply help refugees to know the body parts, this is definitely not enough, because they encounter an interaction with the doctor, and he requires you to use a lot of differentiated words that they do not encounter before. So we need to get a bit of an understanding that a language is very, very complex. And last but not least, language also describes certain discourses. For example, when we read about a patient going to the doctor, is this patient also asking questions and deciding for his or herself, or is this patient simply following the instruction by the doctor? So discourses, language discourses, also help us to understand who is the person in power, who is the inferior, who is the superior, and how do they interact with one another. All this belongs to language when we talk about language. And when we grow up in a when we grow up and learn a certain language, we are all somehow familiar with that. But then when we move to a different country where we have to learn a different language and use it in everyday life, we also need to get a better understanding of all these aspects, because we will repeatedly encounter difficulties, not only based on different words, but also based on maybe different linguistic registers, different discourses. Generally, language.
Yeah, Stefanie, just 1 second. There's Holly just joined us a few minutes ago. So you have we have 4 now in our group. So happy to have you here, Holly.
Thank you.
And we're just going through a little bit about where we all came from. So I think Stefanie's just going to give us an understanding of some of the content, and then we'll have more discussion. So we'll catch you up then. How's that?
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Thank you. Would you like to turn on your microphone? Then we also have a bit of an understanding who you are, and we can see you, and you can also easily interrupt us if you have a question and if you want to jump in.
My microphone is on. I'm going to leave my video off, though. I'm not comfortable right now. Thank you.
Okay, all right. But we know that you're there. That's good.
Okay.
Questions, just raise your voice, and then we can further elaborate on some of the topics that we're touching on.
Great.
So,
Ole and I, by the way, work in the same place. So
yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're co-workers.
In Freiburg.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was saying too, I actually grew up in Fredericton, so I have an affiliation there. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Cool. So we also have already a little bit of an idea of what you are doing, because your colleague has informed us of it.
Great.
Cool. So we focus a little bit on what is language and what is second language, what is it used for, and then also on mental health. And then we will bring it together, and then we will jump in some of the materials that exist in order to help refugees or migrants in order to enhance their mental health and the language skills at the same time. Right now, we are still in the process of taking a closer look at language, then working on taking a closer look at mental health. But right now, it's about language. So what is language? This is what I was talking a little bit on, the different aspects that are related to language and that are highly relevant, because when we talk about mental health, language is highly important. When a person has a broken knee, this person can also simply say, here it hurts. But when it comes to mental health, it is so important to be able to describe it more in detail and use language, because that's the best way of how we can talk about it. So when it comes to language, language is used to perceive, describe, interpret, and communicate our thoughts. In linguistics, we have a very long debate that goes on, and we always want to understand what is first, that we can perceive something and then name it, or that we have a word for something and then we can perceive it. But this debate is still going on, it's not solved yet. So we need to take it from there and move forward. Language, in particular when it comes to second language as well, is used to receiving and sharing information, expressing emotions, communicating about past, present, future, making plans and evaluating the outcomes, and it's the basis for interpersonal relationship. As I'm based in Germany, I'd like to quote Wilhelm von Humboldt. He's an educational scientist who said that language is the forming organ of thoughts. And I like that thought because this is also a starting point for us. If we consider that language is the forming organ of thoughts, then we can also work with refugees, with migrants, and give them more ideas, more thoughts. by enhancing their language to talk about mental health and about different issues that concern their lives. So how is language developed? I also already asked you, and you filled us in that you said that children listen to the radio or to people talk, and then they also try to pronounce it. We always differentiate between, on the one hand, acquiring language and also learning language. Acquiring language is something that starts in early childhood. And in linguistics, we talk about two different closing windows. So if a child has listened to a lot of different sounds in his or her early childhood years until he is 3, he can pronounce all the different sounds that exist in his environment. Whereas after the age of 3, it is getting harder. I tried to pronounce some of the D in Arabic and it didn't work. It was not possible because I started to pronounce or to speak a little bit Arabic later on. So in the first 3 years, this is a time when we are still capable of hearing to all the sounds, and we are also able to pronouncing all of them. Later, it's getting more difficult. And also after the year of 6, after being 6 years of age, it is not possible for us to just soak in the grammar. It is so-called the grammar closing window, because afterwards we really need to work on understanding grammar, learning grammar, whereas young children simply pick it up from their parents and through their siblings and peers. Then later on, as we move on in school, we learn languages, oftentimes structured, for example, a foreign language, maybe French or some other languages. And language learning in school follows a certain structure. Most of the time, we only touch on certain topics, certain areas of life, but mental health is not often part of it. Therefore, by not finding words for it, not having words for it, it is up to the individual to learn these words that are necessary for him or herself to express him or herself. When it comes to language, we already talked a little bit and touched on it. So there's mother tongue, L1, there's foreign language, which we learn when we go to school and we learn a different language, but we do not live in that country where it is used for. Second language is a language that all the migrants who move from one country to another use, because they need to learn the new language, and they do not only encounter it and learn it by going to a language course, but also by interacting with people. And then there are other languages and a lot of linguistic varieties. For example, if you think of Australian English, American English, British English, that's all English, but it's a different variety. So language is complex, language is a lot. And when it comes to combinations of languages, we can see that in particular, migrants often separate languages. So when it comes to talking to their family at home, they speak their first language, but then at the workplace, they need to use the second language. And then there's a lot of varieties, such as code switching and code mixing, that out of the sudden people start talking in English and then switching to Arabic or back and forth. And some studies have shown this can be done deliberately. So maybe people want to include or exclude people who are listening. And they can use it because they might elaborate on a certain concept more in one language than the other, or they have had certain experience in one language or in the other. And in particular, when it comes to talking about emotions, this is when we use the first language, the mother language, because we are more familiar with expressing ourselves in the first language. In addition, there's also crossing, heteroglossia, so a lot of combinations of languages exist. And for a long time, in particular in languages, in countries where one dominant language is used, they said it's only important to speak the main language. But nowadays, within the last 5 years or 10 years, also concepts such as translanguaging has emerged, such as that we use all the languages that we speak in order to express ourselves and communicate effectively. And I think translanguaging is one core concept that we can use in mental health, because it helps us also to support a migrant, a refugee, in order to express himself and herself, maybe first in her own language. Then we try to build bridges, support them with introducing more more words in English, and so that they also are able to speak in different languages and express themselves in the dominant language. Language is not only something that we can easily transfer from one language to another. So if we want to have a closer look at how different people also perceive something, I've brought you this chart. And what can you see in that chart? So I compared English and Swabian language, and I brought 10 of the most common expressions. What stands out to you?
There's a lot more words in the Swabian language. English seems to be shorter and more concise. I don't know.
That's true.
To me, the English is more emotion and the Swabian looks more fact.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's true. You can also see that up here, the Swabian language is there's no word. So when they want to express something and want to say that something is very, very positive, very great, then they would rather refer to, I haven't said anything, therefore everything is fine. Saying nothing is praised enough. This is a very, very common phrase. But when it comes to English, in particular American English, they have a lot of variety of words in order to express that something is very, very good. So if a Swabian person moves to America, he or she encounters a lot of difficulties because she hears that so many people praise a lot of different things all the time, and she thinks that's not possible. Why can they praise all the time? It's not that particular. Whereas when an American person moves to Swabian language, and this person to the Swabian area, and he only hears nothing or something is bad, then this person might also be a little bit irritated maybe, because he or she thinks, where is this praise that I need in order to demonstrate that I've done something great? But at the same time also, when it comes to Swabian trying to praise someone, they do not have any words because there's no word existing. And so when a person from a Swabian background goes to the mental health doctor and then he said, it's okay, this is something which is already very, very good, because they say, well, this is one of the best expressions that we can share. Whereas when an American might go to the psychologist and say, it's okay, this might be really, really bad. So we need to take into consideration the culture where a person comes from in order to get a better understanding how we can compare what she or he says to the situation that she or he encounters right now. And also the language allows us to think more broadly, to praise more, or limits us to praise less. So our language is highly influenced by the context that we've grown up into. And so it's not only about giving migrants words to express themselves in the other language, but also giving them an idea of how that language works and how many emotions are shared in order really to build bridges to people from that country. So when it comes to mental health, the second concept that we want to focus on,
I just wanted to say something because I thought that was very insightful for me.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter, as you know, is married to a German guy, mm-hmm. and he never gave compliments. And we used to be so insulted by this man never complimenting us. Anyway, it's really clear that it's such a cultural difference, and you just mm-hmm. don't think about it because his English is quite good. His mm-hmm. vocabulary is good, but it was contextual. Anyway, we've now seem to come to an understanding after 14 years.
But it can also hurt our feelings because one can think that this person is rude because he is not giving a lot of compliments, but it's not the case. So understanding a person fully, also understanding the language that he or she uses in everyday life helps us to get a little bit of a better understanding, and it helps also to build friendships, which is highly, highly important in a new context. So mental health, I simply laid it out in order to have also the combination of language and mental health. You can simply scroll through it, the definitions, and also the definition for mental health promotion. It is expressed through emotion, gestures, words, and actions, and this is also contextualized. So in order to support refugees and migrants to live in the new country, it's necessary that we also help them to get a better understanding of when do people use the word oh and ah and aha. In some of the German textbooks, we also have some little exercise in order to help them to get a better understanding of, aha, this is the way that's the facial expression that we usually have in order to say that we are surprised. Even though we think emoticons are the same all around the world, this is not always the case. So also helping people to get an understanding of the emotions that are used in the specific culture helps them. So these are some core concepts, we talked about it already, and it's used in particular also to initiate, maintain, and restore friendships, which helps them to improve the mental health. Also, when it comes to how did we acquire and learn mental health, we have already talked a little bit about it, that the family is highly, highly important in that. Also here we can differentiate between acquisition and also learning. So acquisition is this, what we do in everyday life. We always encounter some situations where mental health is required. So we never encounter a situation where mental health is not needed. And when it comes to children learn mental health by observing their parents and family members. What kind of emotions do they express? How do they express them? How do they regulate their feelings? Also by exploring, trying to do something and then getting feedback from their parents. Also by searching deliberately. And then as a counterpart, also the parents are very, very important. They can model feeling and give words to it. They can scaffold, and scaffold is something where in the beginning, the parents support their children more directly, and then less and less and less, such as when a child falls and it cries, then parents can say, yes, sure, I can understand that you cry right now. It is because of this and that and that and that. Next time you can do this and that. And for next time, the parent has not to support a child so intensely. It can simply say, what did we learn before? How can we do that? So scaffolding and empowering people through helping them to do it step by step is very helpful. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, also exposing them to new ideas, to new situations where they have to use their mental health skills and also learn them and develop them further. And for sure, asking questions and help them to understand the causes, the consequences, and the ideas that they can use in order to change their mental health. So important people are family member, friends, and peers in media. And in every life, we have certain transition thresholds, such as school, starting relationships, to the university, moving out, a wedding, or starting a family. All these are critical life events that require from us that we have good mental health skills. And also, for some people, they have specific life events such as sickness, death, or also migration that requires more coping skills than a common transition threshold. And maybe they've learned it from others, and they've seen, such as that the older sister has had a wedding, so this is how it works, so it's easier for me because I had the opportunity to observe it. But when it comes to sickness, death, and migration, it's not so often that we can learn mental health coping skills by simply observing what other people did. And so for migrant families, their life is interrupted by the movement, and they are required to learn new skills. Maybe they are prepared for it because they have already moved to another country and they have already had a chance to learn these skills. Maybe they got some support In Canada, I've heard that you have so many more people who are willing to support migrants and refugees than in Germany, because we have such a high number of refugees coming in. So they are somehow excluded also from the society. Some people will have a successful migration, for some it is difficult. And all these has a huge impact on their mental health for the parents and also for the children in particular. I simply written down a few aspects that have an impact on the parents, such as the circumstances, the socioeconomic decline, the new orientation in the language or the acquisition, which is highly important, but also for the children, the new roles in the family, the affected family situation, and the necessity to start a new life in a new linguistic and cultural context. So I would argue that acquiring language skills and also mental health is somehow similar, because children listen, observe, imitate, explore, discuss. This is appropriate for language skills, and it's also applicable for mental health skills. And parents have the opportunity to model, provide feedback, and advise their children. We are more aware of helping our children to learn the language skills, because we can easily see if their vocabulary, for example, is less than the vocabulary that other people at their age have. But when it comes to mental health, we are not so much aware of it. So it is necessary to be more aware of helping parents to get a better understanding of what is necessary. Up here, it is the common pathway of a child, parent, and how they move on and develop language skills and mental health skills. Whereas for a child and a parent who move, the migration provides a disruption in the everyday life course, and it requires new and different strategies. That also increases the burden, the stress that the family encounters, and the necessity for the new language. So mental health and language skills are somehow similar, acquired and learned, but it's the question, how can we support parents in order to support their children in fostering the language skills and also mental health skills? When we had a closer look at how is it linked, and language and second language and mental health, we only see that language is referred to as a barrier for migrants. That's also something that you've already described, that there's a lack of knowledge in regards to mental health content, and we only know very, very little about mental health of migrants in regards to how we can support them and foster it. When it comes to mental health, first language and second language, we can think of different ways of how we can put them together. We can either say there's no relationship of first and second language, or we can say that language shapes thinking about mental health. It is also that some researchers argue that we perceive in first language the emotions and we can express them in second language. Some researchers have observed that one can use a second language in therapy, for example, to have a closer look at our own situation and thereby somehow having a distance to oneself, and thereby it is easier for us to discuss the critical life event that we encounter. And learning a new language also allows us to broaden our thinking, our way of expressing ourselves, and also our way of being. This is an idea of how we can work with it. But we wanted to see how it is done in second language courses, because the World Health Organization has pointed out that second language courses are very great venues in order to support mental health and health literacy in particular. And so the model of how it could work is that we want to see that migrant children enhance their mental health. But in order that this is going to happen, we somehow need to foster the children's skills. This can be done by migrants, so migrant parents, so we need to know what do migrant parents need in order to do that. And because second language courses can be a good place to support parents, we also need to know how can the second language courses support parents in order to foster the children's mental health, and what task can the can a teacher take on? What would you say when you think of migrant children that you work with? What would you like to see in migrants? What would you like to see in regards to their mental health?
I'm thinking that Holly and Abdelhamid are probably really well positioned to respond to that. I don't work with migrant children, so or parents, so I'm thinking that their experience might be helpful.
What would you say?
I think it's, for example, for the migrant parents, as you mentioned, it's the English classes, it's a good start when they start to teach them English as a language, to also start to discuss issues about mental health and this. And actually, for example, in the Multicultural Association, we do this. So most of the time we arrange information session about different topics, including like mental health. And we have partnership with Victoria Health Center. They send people, sometimes nurses, social worker, and we arrange through the classes information session about different topic regarding to mental health. So we do this actually, and as you mentioned, we use the English classes as a platform to provide this, because the English classes, we have like different level. So some of them need interpretation, some of them, they don't need the higher level. So usually we deliver this information session through the English classes. So it is a really good idea to combine both, learning the language as a skill and also introducing information session about different topics such as mental health through the class. And this regarding the parent. The things I noticed for the migrant children, actually, for example, I mentioned like 3 years ago, we had large number of Syrian immigrants. And what is the amazing thing I noticed is children pick up English very quick. You can see the parents, they don't speak any English, maybe in the foundation level, and the children level of English is fantastic. So I think for the children, maybe they can pick up any information about anything, including like mental health, through the school system. But the school, they need to focus on these children, and they need to know that mental health is different based on your culture, your belief, your religion. Some people in some culture, when they see hallucination, they think it is our grandparents try to reach us, while it is manic episode, something like that. So when you deal with this topic with migrant children, you need to consider their culture, their background, how the parents think. Because sometimes the parent will see abnormal behavior, but they consider this maybe normal in their culture or in their religion, or they think differently. So I think parents teaching can be easy through the English classes. For the children, it will be through the regular school programs, but they need to focus on things related to their, they need to have like cultural competency. They need to understand how the culture shape your mental health, how the culture shape your beliefs. And because you see, as a doctor, it is very easy to diagnose physical thing. Someone blood pressure reaches this level, you have hypertension. But to say someone have stress or anxiety or depression, there is no hard or black and white rules for this. It depends. For example, some culture consider normal level of stress in life, it is normal. But in some culture, they consider this, it is something need treatment. So it depends on your culture, your belief. So mental health is completely related to your culture, your religion, your belief. So if you're teaching these topics in the school to migrant children, you need to consider their cultural background. If to be effective in reaching this information to them, you need to consider their cultural background, put it in consideration when you teach them this in school.
Yeah.
I think Holly was going to speak there too.
Abdelhamid brought up a very good point about how children are often, quicker to learn language. So what I've observed is, children who interpret for their parents, and while some people can find that endearing and sweet, it's actually, I think it can be problematic, because what I'm seeing is a lot of youth, a lot of children that are not necessarily able to be children, right? They're having to, grow up quicker, take on these roles that are, not typically in the North American context, I should say, roles that children would take on, right? So at that time, I'm seeing that a lot of youth can't fully participate in what it means to be an adolescent or a child, right? And I think that goes to, what we need for children is what we need for parents. We need better supports for parents, right? In order for children to be fully able to equitably participate in their community. And, you brought up a very good point about how mental health is modeled and absorbed. So that's why I really think there needs to be a strong focus on parents, right? Because they're absorbing everything that they're seeing, and they're having to translate these very sometimes difficult conversations, and in terms of their level of cognitive maturity, it might not be something that they're able to necessarily understand, but they're there listening and absorbing all of it. So I think a lot of this, it needs to be the responsibility of the greater community. And what I've seen, for organizations like our own, is that, we're doing this work, we're here listening and learning, but are the practitioners who are the ones that are, part of that medical model of mental health, are they doing this work as well, right? Trying to understand how language influences how we understand mental health, how culture influences. I don't know that they are, right? So I'd like to see that that initiative from medical practitioners who are part of that mental health system.
Holly, I think you raised a really good point. I'm just listening to it and thinking, we probably need to put more support through the second English as a second language, or German as a second language, whatever, around the parents and the teachers. But maybe there needs to be, and maybe you're doing this in Fredericton, or maybe Stefanie, you know about it, but is there outreach so that professionals can understand the concepts that you've just covered in terms of the impact of language on mental health? Are we doing any work to broaden this conversation? And has the conversation with teachers who teach English or whatever as a second language, has that gone far enough? I wonder what you think, both of you. Or three of you. Sorry.
I think that in terms of our healthcare system here in New Brunswick, our system here has really been struggling and has been. So for example, just an anecdotal thing, at an emergency room here in our city, we saw a trend of clients not being served in their language and being able to communicate what their symptoms were. due to a resistance to use a language line and rather just rely on sort of body language, physical, like being able to see visible symptoms. So if you add mental health to that layer, that can be really problematic. So what we've done is, you know, we reach out to these community partners to say, you know, here's what we're seeing. What can we do to support you, and ensuring that, you know, our clients are being treated equitably and that their experiences are equitable in the healthcare system. And, you know, most of the time, what I'm seeing in the community is like, they're usually like, yes, please help us. And that's usually what I personally have seen is just trying to tread water, mostly just trying to keep above. So there's really no opportunity to do that good macro level work when we're just sort of doing it on a case by case basis, which I can't remember if that was discussed yesterday, but anyway, yeah, it's troubling to not take it to a macro level, as opposed to that sort of case by case anecdotal level where we just use advocacy as a form of you know, making sure our clients have a good experience.
Can I just add something to this?
Sure.
Yeah.
For example, we in the multicultural here, we're trying to improve this area, which is the interaction between the client and the healthcare provider. For example, we have like 3 things we do here, which sometimes improve things. Number 1, we do like what we call a culture competency training. So we provide concept about what's the culture, what is the importance of culture for the service provider. And we do this for people from the like police force, health services, and we're just trying to pass the message to them that culture is important part of everyone's life. So you need to consider this when you're dealing with them in the police station or in the hospital or in the clinic. Culture shape us, shape how we think and how we react to things. And especially if you deal with mental health related to emotion and feeling, and all these things 100% related to your culture, your religion, the way you brought up. So it's really very tightly related to mental health. So this culture competency training we provide to the service provider. This is the first one. The second one, every year we do a community training for interpretation. And we do the one also for the service provider, just to inform them how you can use interpreter and the best way of using interpretation in services. For example, like the point Holly mentioned, avoid using children. You cannot expose the children to this stressful situation, talking about mental health issue regarding to the parent with the child, 7, 8 years old, which is completely wrong. Or using Google Translate or all this. So we do this training for the service provider also to pass the message to them, what is the best ways to use interpretation in your services to provide good services to clients. And the third thing we have also in the multicultural, we have a program called Cultural Broker. So we bring people from different communities who have good level of English and other language, either Arabic, Somali, Swahili, or whatever. And we give them a lot of training. And we connect them with the different service provider. For example, if we have someone with mental health issues and he will need counseling, and he speaks Somali or Swahili, we try to find someone from his community, from his culture. He speaks the same language. Because when he go for interpretation for him in counseling session, number 1, he got good relation with him, so he will be more comfortable maybe to express his emotion with using this person. And as you mentioned, expression of emotion is completely different in every language. For example, in Arabic, if you sad, different degree of sadness have different words to say. It's not only sad. or a joy or happy. No, different degree of sadness have different words in Arabic, which is not necessarily to find the same meaning in English. So understanding the language and the culture help a lot, especially again, if you deal with something related to mental health. So I think these three things, culture competency, culture broker program, and training for health service provider or other service provider can help to breach this gap and put the message to this service provider. If you want to provide good service, you need to do some work. You cannot say, okay, it is up to the client to pass the information to me. It's up to the client to give me what I need. You need to do your part if you want to provide good services for them.
I totally agree. We also have these initiatives in Germany, so cultural brokers, translator, and cultural trainings for health staff. But when we take a closer look at the people who moved to the country and we want to empower them, then we can't always depend on interpreters. It would be very, very great if they have the language skills and they also have the self-confidence to speak up for themselves after some time. And therefore, in particular, language courses are focusing on empowering people at least to communicate and also get familiar with the surrounding area. Therefore, we had a closer look at language courses. And also an additional comment to cultural trainings. I'm working in this research project where we focus on health literacy and second language courses, and we also discussed the topic if we should bring in some ideas of different cultures and train teachers to understand a little bit more about it. But then the issue is that you might sit in front of a person from an Arabic background. For sure, there are some cultural tendencies that this person might express. But also within a culture, there is such a huge variety. And what we sometimes encountered here is that volunteers in Germany have read a lot about different cultures, and then they approached the people and they said, well, you need to behave like this and that and that, because I've read that and all people from that culture show these behaviors. And by this, it is prescriptive. It is not that the people themselves can describe and express what is important for them. And therefore, in our project, we've decided that we do not train teachers in order to understand all the different cultural backgrounds, but we give them some ideas in order to stimulate conversations on the topic, and the person themselves, the person he or herself, they can express what they think about it. Because then it's not a prescriptive way, it is a descriptive way, but by themselves. I quickly want to cover, not this, but different approaches that we identified in our project based on how we can support parents through language courses, that they can support children directly or indirectly. So on the one hand, we have identified 5 ways. So the direct approach is, on the one hand, we can support parents to enhance their children's mental health literacy by giving them ideas of what they can do with their children directly. So you can draw a lifeline. You can talk with your children about emotions, what they've done. You can identify stresses in your community and talk with your children about what is stressful and what can you do about it. So providing ideas that the parents themselves can use them within the family, and also discussing the role of families and the role of mental health, in particular the intergenerational role changes that occur. But by having an idea, they can also be more aware of what they can change within the family, and they might see some of the stresses and some of the normal behavior of their children, and also some of the abnormal behavior that might need some additional support. They can also, there are also semi-direct approaches such as that we can focus on the mental health literacy of the parents themselves by supporting them to identify their emotions, to naming their emotions, to identify stressor, to identify different interventions that can be done, to define if the intervention can be done by themselves or in a group, short-term, long-term, and also support them that they bring in some changes in their life so that they feel better. And then two other very important aspects are the indirect changes and indirect targeting the children, because on the one hand, attending a language course can also be a place to relax. They can meet other people, they can have a small break from their family life, and then they go back home refreshed. And by this, they are also more aware and more flexible to respond to the children's needs when they come home. And in addition, it can also provide the opportunity to enhance a lot of different skills, language skills, but also the knowledge necessary for living in the new country, behavioral skills, cognitive skills, soft skills, and also building connections to people in the surrounding area and in the context, so that they are strengthened. Direct, semi-direct, and indirect ways of targeting children. Furthermore, we can talk about 5 different approaches. So these are the feeling approach. This is when parents come to English as a second language course and they feel that someone is caring for them. They also feel relaxed. And then they can also show more emotions, more empathy towards other people. So they are more connected to their own feelings when they attend a second language course and the teacher is providing an atmosphere that helps them to relax. Furthermore, the experiencing, observing approach is that parents can talk to other people about how they deal with certain issues, how they handle this, how do they cope with this and that. And by informal and formal conversation, they get new ideas of how they themselves can address that issue. And in some new curricula, they also brought in some stories of people who migrated from one place to another, and they described the intergenerational changes, and that offers an opportunity for the person first to observe it, then to think about the observed situation for themselves and try to apply it. Furthermore, and this is a very common approach, is the thinking approach. So it's a cognitive approach where we identify stressor, where we identify our emotion, where we identify things that we can change and then try to implement that. The thinking approach. The intervention approach is that parents can learn how to be good parents. So parenting skills can be taught through second language courses. And some second language courses here in Germany can also pick up that. So they teach parents how to be good parents. And furthermore, last but not least, the comprehensive approach. This is more from a general level, so that by learning the new language, by getting in touch with people from the society, you can also build a strong fundament, a strong basis that you need in order to start a new life in the new country. Maybe you find a job, and then by having this secure situation that you are in, the stable situation, you are more relaxed, and a lot of the burden, a lot of the stressors are also removed, and your children feel more healthy. And so 5 approaches. We do not have a lot of time, but I want to show you.
We have till 11:45, Stefanie, okay. So you've got another 15.
But I want to show a few approaches that are used in second language courses in order to start conversations with parents about their own stress, their own mental health. And maybe this is also something that you can think of if you would like to integrate it in some of your own lessons or share with some of the English as a second language teachers. I also added these, I uploaded it to the workshop yesterday. So you can go back to them, you have some ideas. On the one hand, picture stories. Pictures in itself allows us, on the one hand, to describe changes, and Kate Singleton has created a lot of different picture stories that touch on different situations that migrants face when they move to another country. And by using pictures, they also it is also an opportunity that people start talking about it in their first language. Maybe they have some support by the teacher to find words in order to express what they've seen in the second language. And step by step, they can start from describing in their own language, then building on language skills, and then they can describe it in English. So they have an opportunity to dive into the story, describe it, feel it, discuss it, but then also get more language skills in the new language that is required. Another curricula that I would like to highlight is Language 911, which touches on unnatural causes. It is a video series that is available in English. Unfortunately, the screenshot is not that good, but you can also find a link to the original title to it. And so they produced a lot of different short videos where they talk about determinants of health and how they affect the life situation of migrants and of others. And they created some curricula that can be used, also talking about stress, taking control. And for example, here, they embrace a more health behavior approach, because they said, well, why don't you start and write out a sketch action plan, so a schedule. What did you do on Monday, Tuesday until Sunday? What kind of exercise did you do? What diet did you eat? What fun things did you do? And you can write it down and you can discuss it. Or you can also watch the videos together, which are also available in printed versions, so you can also read it. And you can see a lot of unnatural causes that do not support health but sickness. This is an approach that is used in Germany, where we also trained a lot of refugees about mental health, where we had 90 minutes classes in different initial reception centers and refugee camps, and where we simply shared a lot of ideas more on mental illnesses also related. So what are stressors? How can we recognize mental disorders? What are some ideas that we can do in order to feel better? What can we do in order to prevent it? And what can be done? And this was done in the first language of the migrants in order to help them to get the information across. It was less about helping them to communicate about mental health in German or in English. Another approach is Healthwise that I can highly recommend. It is provided by an initiative in Australia, and they focused in 12 different units on a lot of different health issues that young people encounter when they move to a different country. And they also tackle on the issue cultural shock, or moving to another culture, how to make friends, what are my feelings, and so on. These resources are available online, and maybe it is a good idea to go through it and get a new idea of how you can also help people to get a better understanding of the different words that are used in a different language, and also to understand more of their own life. Another approach is to use pictures. This is what I have done with a class of mine where I was teaching when I was teaching German as a second language, and we had 15 women with little children. On the one hand, we have done something which is called Photovoice. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Are you?
I've heard about it. I haven't used it. I don't know whether Holly and Abdullah have.
No, I don't know.
No.
Abdullah.
Okay. So Photovoice is more or less an empowerment tool that can be used in order to help. Usually it started out to help youth to talk about their own needs and about their own activities, and then make it available to policymakers. So it is usually a free step program On the one hand, the people are invited to take pictures on a certain situation or a certain question. It started out that some children who lived in very severe circumstances, who came from a socioeconomic lower background, they were invited to take pictures of situations in their life that are stressful. And then they took the camera and they walked around and they took pictures of maybe a garbage bin that was overflowing, maybe a lot of water that was on the ground, it was already dirty, and so on. And they walked through the environment and took pictures of it. And then they brought it to the lecturer or to the teacher, and then discussed it, they talked about it. And also the teacher asked, so what is it and why is it there? And what do you think we can do about it? So after taking pictures, they discussed it, and the people were invited to talk about it and describe what is important for them and what they would like to see that is going to be changed. And then in addition, they provided a little bit of policy brief, and they said, this is necessary, this is what we like to see changed in our environment. And this approach, by taking pictures, it is a way of helping people to capture something which is of value for them. And you do not need to be very fluent in the other language. You can simply take a picture of what is important for you. And then the next step is that you are asked to describe. So it's not someone else who say, aha, I see a filled garbage bin, most likely you dislike it because it might stink or so. Maybe they say, no, because there are so many rats around and they always make so loud noises. So it is the person himself can describe it. And then the next step is really to bring it up, talk with politicians about it and see if you can change something. I used this Photovoice together with some women, and I asked them not to take pictures of what is very difficult for them and what is stressful in their life, but because there are so many hard things they encountered in everyday life, I wanted to help them to see and have a closer look at what is good in their lives. And so I asked them, please take pictures of situations where you felt very loved, where you enjoyed yourself, where you felt refreshed, and so on and so on. And they came back and they took a lot of pictures of them sitting together in the garden, enjoying a picnic together, but also when they attended a gathering of women in the neighborhood, or when they were standing in front of a beautiful flower tree, or when they went out and went shopping. They came back and they had a lot of different ideas, and it was wonderful to see how many ideas they came up with. And this also allowed us to talk about some of the specific aspects, and they described it from their own perspective, from their own culture. And by this, it was not a teacher who needed to describe everything and who needed to know everything. The women themselves brought it up. And it was so interesting because when we had all the pictures out there, most of the people said, yes, I also like that. And this helps me again. And this helps me again. And this. But on the next day, when we simply asked them, so what is good for you? What do you enjoy? They only used a few German words they knew. And then they said, well, I love going for a walk. And I like to spend time with my family. Full stop, period. Nothing else came up. And then we brought up all the different pictures and I said, yes, for sure. And this is good for me. And this is good for me. And this is good for me. And I was stressed last week. And so I tried that and that helped me. So by having pictures and allowing people to describe it in their first language and also in the second language, this helps a lot. And so we worked a lot with pictures. All these pictures that you can see here are from the website unsplash.org. So photographers offer these pictures for free, and they are very, very helpful because we use them to talk about different emotions. And then we also started out, so what do you think? Why do people feel like that? And what can you do about it? And by having pictures, it was useful. They felt attached to it. It was not that they felt attached to a simple word that we used, such as relaxing. This was something which was too far away from them. But when they've seen a picture, they can immediately jump into the situation, get familiar, get acquainted with it, and try to come up with new ideas. And then the next step was that's what you can see up here. So we brought in a lot of, these are German words because I used it, so a lot of emotions that they can use in order to describe it. Not just good and bad, but a variety of different emotions. And then we also talked that emotions can come and they can go, and we can also influence the emotions. So it is important to see how often do I have it. So frequency words we brought in, and then also the intensity, is it high, is it less, and so on. By this, we allowed them to broaden their vocabulary and broaden their way of talking about emotions. And in addition, we also brought in a lot of different ideas of why people can feel like it. Deliberately, we've chosen a few sentences such as, I am sad because my family is not here. We brought in a few words and sentence statements that are related to bad situations, but we brought in a lot of positive activities in order to help them to stimulate a good mental health. And they loved it. So pictures are something that helps us to get a better, and helps them to talk about what is necessary for them. Let me quickly show 2 more slides, because this is what also came out of the research project. On the one hand, we saw that second language skills, so not only first language skills, but second language skills are highly important, because only then, when we are able to speak the other language, we are also able to build friendships to others, because we can express our empathy, we can express our emotions, and we can bond to other people. And this is what we see often in Germany. Even though we have so many migrants, many of them go to their friends who speak their own language in order to talk about their emotions and about their feelings and about the things that stress them, because then they can talk in their own language. But empowering them and also allowing them to use the second language to express emotions helps them to build deeper relationships that also are useful when you are in need of someone. You can communicate about mental health. You can inform yourself about available programs and offers. You can speak up for yourself, and you can initiate change also on the political level. However, when it comes to a combination of first and second language, it is extremely unique for each person. There's not a tendency like this or that and that. We need to ask the person themselves. And it's also a great advantage to see how they use the first and second language and how what they prefer. And definitely in second language courses, we can empower parents through 4 different ways. On the one hand, through the enhancement of language, so they have a lot of options to think and to communicate. We can share content, that they have a better understanding of mental health topics, and they can also have better understanding of the different interventions that exist, and they can choose from one. We can share interventions that they can use in their family, so they can improve the mental health of their children as well. And for sure, being together, talking about a situation that they encounter in a group also helps to learn from and with one another, and social support. And in a nutshell, what I wanted to get across is that language and mental health are related. Our parents are important to foster our language and mental health skills all the time, in particular in the early years. Migration is a critical life event, and it puts a lot of stress on us. Parents can support their children in many ways, directly, indirectly, and semi-directly. And second language courses have a lot of different approaches in order to reach out to parents. A very helpful procedure that we've identified when it comes to supporting mental health is supporting people to perceive their feelings, naming them, explaining the origin and the consequences of the feelings, exploring options for change, improving and initiating change. And in each of these little components, second language courses can jump in and bring in new ideas. It's a great potential, but still not a lot of empirical evidence is out there. And it's also very hard to do research on it. But it's a sustainable and promising way. And this is what we encountered, and we are still working on it. And I'm very happy to stay in touch, to be in touch with people who also are interested in that topic, because I think it's worth to bring in new ideas and new concepts so that really this menu that it exists can still be used and is used in a better way. There's one other material that I also would like to share with you in particular, because you just talked about it. It is from the International Rescue Committee, because they have brought out a lot of materials for parenting, in particular parenting of refugee children, social emotional learning, supporting parents to be good parents of refugees. That's it. What do you think about the ideas that I just shared? We have 2 more minutes.
Be good to hear from our 2 participants, and then we'll draw to a close. So you need some feedback, I think. What do you think, Holly and Abdelhamid?
It's been very interesting. You know, it's, as you've gone through things, I've thought about our own experiences here in Canada and in our region of the country. So, and I can think of some coworkers I'd like to share this presentation with. So, my understanding, everything's being recorded, so hopefully I'll be able to share that with some of my coworkers too.
And the slides are already up on the
Great.
Yeah, so you can download those anytime.
Sorry, you said where is the slide, where you can find it? Is it in the document part?
When you go to the workshops,
okay,
there we could add some documents.
You mean just click on the workshop, then there will be download?
Exactly, yeah.
And there will be also recording for any session which been over the last 2 days?
Yes, there will be. We have to edit them. I mean, there's a lot of rough spots, as you can imagine. So we need to tidy them up. But then probably within 2 weeks, we hope to have them available on Whova for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And we'll send a note out to let you know when.
Currently not available. It will be available maybe after 2 weeks.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. But the PowerPoint, all of them available in the okay. It was really a very interesting topic, really, and just the relation between language and mental health and how this affects everyone. It's a really very important thing. And for me, although I said I'm a doctor, but it's really interesting to know how your brain will be shaped at very young age according to all this study which was done, and part of what happening to you in this very young age, it will shape your brain and will affect how you will behave and later in the life, and how you will achieve your goals or not, how you will be resilient to different mental health issues and not. I think it is really something a lot of us, and even I said I'm doctor, but we didn't know that really it make big difference how you deal with babies, how you deal with a child, and how you react with them, because you shaping their brain and you shaping your emotion and everything and their feeling, which will affect their life later on. So I think, as we mentioned, to teach the parent about these things, it is really very important, because I think a lot of people, they have no clue about it. Everyone used to think that babies, they say, whatever you do to them doesn't make any difference, you know. They are very young, you know? They don't appreciate what's happening around, which is proven already is completely wrong, and it make big difference if you hug your child or your baby or you don't hug them if they are infant, you know. And it's a really amazing thing, but people need to know about it, because I think we don't know about these things. So we need to know about it. Yeah.
So, and if we know it already, we can also share it with parents, we can share it with second language teachers, because then we can spread that news and people can also change their behavior towards infants, towards toddlers, towards children, so that we can not only provide a good environment for them to stimulate and learn a new language, but also their mental health, which is highly important.
You know, on that note, Stefanie, I've found this to be extremely interesting, and also I've appreciated the comments from the two of you. Good conversation, and I've learned a lot for me to reflect on. So I want to thank you so much. Here's one of the advantages of us being online. You didn't have to travel from Germany to talk to us today.
I wanted.
Maybe next year, we'll see. We have to get through COVID first, right? Okay, well, thank you so much, Stefanie, and we will have everything here. It will be recorded, your handouts are there, and all good to start having broader conversations with people in our community. Take care, everyone, and thanks so much. Bye for now.
Thank you, Stefanie. Thank you, Patsy.
Welcome. Bye-bye.